The Pacific Northwest has always been my home. I've lived in Washington State for 9 years, and that's where a majority of my family resides. I moved to Idaho and started anew there after my parents divorced when I was 10, and then I jumped over to Oregon when I was 23 after falling in love with the cozy mountain town that I've resided in for 6 years now. The rain is my comfort, the mountains my mystery, and the ocean an absolute captor of glory. Coffee here in the Pacific Northwest is a staple, and I've always joked that even Sasquatch is picky about his coffee. And although this area is cozy and comforting, there's always been a mystery and secrecy to it too. I'm Lorna Bailey, and you're listening to Coffee with Sasquatch. I have a weird obsession with rural Oregon. The Pacific Northwest is known for its trees and forests, but in some portions there are some more desolate rural desert areas that hold their own beauty. I think it's the comfort of the seclusion, of a quiet, simpler life, and there really is nothing like watching a thunder and lightning storm in the desert. One of these areas is a little less known, but lays hours away from the nearest town in secluded Central Oregon, and that area is a ghost town built around a formation known as Fort Rock. It's so secluded that the county has on average 1 person per square mile. Fort Rock is unique in that it could be an actual fort. It's a semicircle of hardened magma that spans up to 4,460 feet in diameter and stretches as far as 200 feet tall. From an aerial viewpoint, it's quite strange looking down at the Oregon desert and seeing such an odd semicircle rock formation in the middle of a valley. The formation itself is suspected to have occurred when an active volcano exploded under what was once a lake thousands of years ago. The magma hardened around the formation and became the standing natural feature it is today. In the shadows of Fort Rock lies Pioneer Cemetery. Upon doing my research about this cemetery, I came across this piece written by Wayne P. Christensen describing how it feels to be living but walking among the dead in the shadow of Fort Rock. He says, "It is a spooky place where the silent stillness is broken only by the ever-present desert wind that moves across the flats in an endless race with eternity, tumbleweeds bounding before it on their journey to nowhere. The tombstones vary from small metal plaques to weather-cracked wooden boards standing vertically, their tops rounded like the stereotypical upside-down U-shaped tombstones from some old Hollywood movie. In a couple of plots, there were only small metal markers with no names, only dates. The whispering wind seemed to mock me, murmuring softly, 'You'll never know, you'll never know.' There are dark things about this cemetery that cause me to wonder. For one, the place contains an inappropriate number of children. Their stones are marked with poignant memorials, here a baseball glove, there some small toy. In the wind-whipped branches of a hoary sage, there rests a weather-worn child's cowboy boot, the leather cracked and peeling. Within the shadow of the same bush, a stone marker with a long-forgotten name. A dry gust sends trickles of bone-weight dust across the soil. To me, the proof that life was here exists with Pioneer Cemetery. But long before pioneer settlers claimed the area, Fort Rock served as the native homeland of the Northern Paiute tribe. In 1938, archaeologist Luther Cressman from the University of Oregon found a pair of sandals in nearby Derrick Cave, 1.5 miles away from Fort Rock. He found the sandals beneath a layer of volcanic ash that's believed to be from the eruption of Mount Mazama, or what is now known as Crater Lake. The sandals were found in near-perfect condition and are made up of shredded sagebush bark. Radiocarbon dating has led archaeologists to believe that the shoes are 9,000 years old and are the oldest proof of human life to be found in Oregon, and they are the second oldest pair of shoes to be found worldwide. There have been multiple other types of these woven shoes found by archaeologists in the surrounding area, though none are as well preserved as the original pair found by Luther Cressman. Many historians are led to believe that this group of shoes found in the area belonged to the Paiute tribe. It was 1909, and the U.S. had just passed the Homestead Act. Settlers infamously rushed to claim their free land. The season that multiple settlers found the Fort Rock area was during the cycle of nature when life was abundant and the bluegrass waved through the wind promising life and prosperity. Or so they thought. As the grass died and gave way to the hard, cold, dry winters that Central Oregon brings, life became hard for folks that had chosen to make their home in the valley and the shadow of Fort Rock itself. Water became scarce during the winter months, and many folks abandoned their land, no longer able to make it through the harsh weather that overcame the valley. Between the lack of water, vicious cold, and extreme winds that accompany any desert climate, these homes lay empty for years to come, and many were eventually moved into what now exists as Fort Rock Homestead Village Museum. Some of the buildings that stand now existing in this village hold plenty of history from these settlers that chose to make their life in the valley surrounding Fort Rock. One of these settlers was pioneer Dr. Tom. He was the only doctor in the entire area during the 1918 Spanish influenza epidemic, and throughout that time, he only lost one patient to the flu and saved hundreds of lives. His office building still stands today in the Homestead Village Museum, preserving his legacy. Another log cabin that still stands was built in 1910 and belonged to George and Hazel Mencamar, who had a dream of creating a homestead for their two children, Beatrice and Boots. Tragically, Hazel died in a runaway accident while raking hay, and shortly after that, George passed away from a fatal illness. Bob and Beatrice were taken in and raised by nearby friendly neighbors. Boots became a professional and well-known rodeo rider, but was also tragically killed at a young age in a rodeo accident. Beatrice married a local rancher and graciously agreed for their childhood log cabin home to be moved to the Homestead Village when it was formed in 1988. Of course, as the pioneer settlers created their life in the valley that is anchored by Fort Rock, families needed to send their children to school. That school also still stands today in the village and is known as Sunset School, built in 1912. It's the only remaining school of 20 that were built throughout the valley in the last 100 years. There are rumors that one of the schools suffered a fire at one point, and that could be the cause of why there's so many graves of young children in Pioneer Cemetery. However, the graves of all the young children are still a mystery today. There's no true answer as to why there are so many children buried in the Pioneer Cemetery, and my best guess is that if not a school fire, life on a homestead, as much as it is romanticized, was difficult to say the least. During World War II, nuclear fear was very real, and in 1963, residents of Fort Rock planned to use Derrick Cave as a fallout shelter if the Japanese decided to bomb the west coast of the US. In preparation for such an event, supplies of food and water were stored in the cave for up to 1,200 people. I imagine the relief that they never had to use the cave as a fallout shelter, and because the cave is also known to be the host and home to Townsend's big-eared bats. A bat, of course, with almost prehistoric looking ears that are 3 times larger than their own heads. And you know it's not really a ghost town without your friendly neighborhood ghost. Rube Long grew up on his family's ranch in the Fort Rock Valley after the family purchased land in 1900 when Rube was 2 years old. At the time, their homestead was so rural that they made a trip once a year to a town called Prineville to get supplies. Because the soil in the valley was alkaline heavy and water was scarce, it was nearly impossible to grow a garden in the valley. When Rube was 11 years old, his family sent him to a nearby lake one summer 40 miles south of their homestead to grow a garden. He was very successful at it, and every 3 days would make the trip back and forth between home and the garden. On the first day, he would ride out to the garden, the second, tend to the garden, and on the third day, ride the 40 miles home on horseback. This continued until the fall, when the Long family was able to load 2 wagons full of vegetables. Rube was a cowboy from the start, having to ride 11 miles to school and then 11 miles home every single day. Rube Long lived a happy, productive, and fruitful life as a rancher in the Fort Rock area. Oftentimes, Hollywood would come knocking wanting to shoot Western films in the area. Rube served as an advisor and would help them find locations for films, and even served as an extra in some of the films, one of them being a dangerous chase scene on horseback in the movie The Indian Fighter. When he wasn't commingling and hanging out with Hollywood actors, he served as an advocate for the Fort Rock area, serving on the Oregon State Board of Agriculture, the Bureau of Land Management, and even helped convince the Bonneville Power Administration and the federal government to finally bring electricity out to the area. Power and an electrical grid was brought to the Fort Rock area finally in 1955. Rube was known by many as being wise, tough, and an incredible storyteller. Should you decide to visit Fort Rock yourself, explore responsibly, and remember to not disturb any wildlife, artifacts, or any remaining ghosts and spirits that have yet to move on from the area. And if you see Rube riding around on his horse, say hi to him for me. I think he likes it when people say hello. Thanks for hanging out with me and listening to Coffee with Sasquatch. This show is a labor of love, and I would really appreciate it if you took a moment to leave a review, subscribe to the show, and share it with your friends and family who might also enjoy some of the mystery that lies in the Pacific Northwest. Got a story that you want to share that's happened in either Washington, Oregon, or Idaho that you think would be a good fit for the show? Email me at coffeewithsasquatchpod@gmail.com and share your story with me. You don't have to be named, and you can be anonymous. Thanks for listening.